Hello and welcome again to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Grief and critical illness are something that unfortunately will affect everyone sooner or later, but it's also an area where managers and leaders don't really get much in the way of training or guidance really on how to deal with it when it happens in the workplace or when it affects the people that they are leading. My guest today is Kim Hamer, an HR leader and author of the book 100 Acts of Love, which is all about how to help your friends, your colleagues, your co-workers through life-changing diseases like cancer or ultimately loss. So she's going to have some great insights to share with us today on what we as managers can do to help our colleagues through this difficult process.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Kim, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning from sunny LA, I'm going to assume.
Well, it's a good assumption, but today I'm looking at my window and it's actually a little overcast, but I'm not going to complain because it's going to be 65 degrees or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I always forget how to do it Celsius for the backwards way. Yeah. Okay. We'll just smile and nod our heads. Yep.
Yeah. I've no idea, I'm afraid. Yeah. Let's call it hot.
Okay.
Certainly compared to where I am anyway. It's,
okay.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and it's dark. So,
oh yeah. Yep.
I'm going to start, as I always do, by handing the reins over to you to introduce yourself, talk a bit about what you do and how you ended up doing it.
Well, my name is Kim Hamer, and I help managers and HR teams who are dealing with employees dealing with cancer, loss, or depression understand how to be compassionate and productive at the same time. I think most of us, care about our employees, or some people don't, but we'll put those ones aside for the moment. And we don't know what to do or what to say. And then we feel like we need to be super compassionate. And then all of a sudden we're realizing that we're not getting the work out of them that we need, but we feel like we can't ask them because they're going through this really difficult time. And I help managers understand how to communicate clearly and set some clear guidelines with not just the employee who's dealing with cancer, but the team as well, because it's a team disease is what ends up happening. If one person has depression, the team is affected. If one person has cancer, the team is affected. And how I got here was my husband was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer out of the blue. It was super aggressive. About 3 weeks before he was diagnosed, he was having a little bit of trouble breathing and seemed to be coughing a lot. So we were treating it with ibuprofen and cough syrup. Clearly that didn't go so well. And 3 weeks later, he went to go see a doctor, and the doctor was like, you have very bad cancer. It's in your lungs. It's spread throughout his body. And within a week of that diagnosis, within 8 days of that diagnosis, he was getting treatment. Cause there was they couldn't mess around with it. They needed to get him in, as soon as possible. He had to have surgery in between that. And what we both found when he was sick was that some people knew exactly what to say or what to do while others didn't have a clue. And sometimes, a lot of people said things that they thought were going to be helpful, but were actually cruel. And so this process, we're going through it. My husband becomes cancer-free. There's a celebration. We're trying to put our lives back together because it's not like everything is great and I have a second lease on life. It's an adjustment. There's chemo. There's not chemo. There's side effects from the chemo, side effects from the cancer treatment on our marriage, side effects on our family. So we were building our lives back together, and then less than 2 years later, it came back and he died at the age of 44. And we had 3 kids at the time who were 12, 9, and 7. And we noticed the same thing again. Some people knew exactly what to do. Others didn't know what to do. And that became really apparent when my husband died. And so what I did was a couple of years later is I actually sat down and wrote a book called 100 Acts of Love, A Girlfriend's Guide to Loving Your Friend Through Cancer or Loss. And I wrote it for all those people who didn't know what to do, because after I got through my resentment, I realized that I was one of those people before my husband had cancer. I thought I knew what to say. I thought I knew what to do, and I didn't. And I wanted people to really understand, one, how important they are in the lives of the person who's dealing with this tragedy. Two, how easy it is to actually support someone with cancer. And three, how it's not this how it doesn't have to be this heart wrenching, right? What to say and what to do, or what to say. So I wrote this book, and then I went back to work. I had been staying home with our children while my husband was working. And I went back into the HR field, and the very first job I had was with a president of the company whose wife had cancer and she died. And I noticed the same thing that I noticed in our real lives. People didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to support. So that is when I started to come up with some ideas of, oh, okay, well, if a company doesn't know what to do, what can a company do? How can a manager support an employee? Because I get that they have to get work done, right? A lot of managers, many managers sometimes have the first thought when an employee says, hey, my wife died, is their first thought is, oh crap, what am I going to do? Because he's on this major project. I can't do, right? Their first thought is actually sometimes about work. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a thought. So through my years in HR, I started to develop something I call the North Star strategy, which helps managers understand how to have those really crucial conversations with the employee who's dealing with this tragedy or this thing that's happening in their lives, how to have those crucial conversations with the team, and how to get the work done that needs to get done in a way that doesn't build resentment or something we called, empathy. I'm spacing on the word right now, when there's too much empathy, and allows the team to feel closer and more supportive of each other, which actually ends up, as we all know, increasing employee engagement at a time when most of the time employee engagement drops.
Wow, what a story. Well, firstly, very sorry to hear of your loss.
Thank you.
Secondly, I'm definitely one of those people who never knows what to say, as you may have guessed from the horrible cliche that I just said.
It's actually not a cliche, and we'll go through that, okay, but it's, no, it's not at all.
Okay. So I guess my question is, obviously is tied up in facing your own mortality to an extent, and I guess that's part of the reason, but why is it, do you think, people struggle so much with what to say in those situations?
Well, it's interesting. I was listening to the podcast where you interviewed Jerry McNamara, I think you said his name is, and he talked about, how people are, we all want to, no one gets on their deathbed and says, gosh, I wish I didn't do that. And most people are saying, I wish I had done that. And I think the reality is we're not trained. We don't know what to say or what to do. And we're terrified. Right. And at least in most of the Western cultures that I know of, we want to fix things. We want to make it better. We don't like to just kind of do nothing. And we can't fix the cancer. We certainly cannot fix the loss of somebody, whether it's a coworker or their partner, child, mother. We can't fix depression. Right. And so it feels very nebulous, like it's this thing we can't wrap our hands around. I think there's that piece of it. And let's be really honest, in the 50s, so just 60 years ago or 70 years ago, we were whispering the word cancer. Nobody talked about depression. In the last 10 years, it's been an okay thing to talk about. I think that coupled with social media, we now see it a lot more. We hear about it. People are grieving publicly. And so now it feels more like it's in the spotlight and there's more opportunity to learn what to say. But it's something that, we've been very kind of terrified. The other issue is that we're an expanded community. So, it used to be when a small town and somebody died, everybody felt that loss, and people just sort of knew to kind of continue to show up and support. Now we're in an expanded community, and those lessons have been sort of lost. So I think that's why. And we have work, and work has always been a place where you show up and you put on a different hat and you come to work. And now, of course, it's switched, especially with COVID, really switched, but we're still making those adjustments to really walking that personal professional line. It's not even a line. It's like a smudge. It's like charcoal. It's like, there's kind of this kind of messy thing. Sometimes it's really nice and clean, and sometimes it's kind of messy. And so, we're still trying to figure that out. So I don't think that anyone should feel bad about not knowing what to say, because we haven't been taught. We don't know. We copy what our parents did and said. And we see, you see someone on TV say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss." So you go, "Okay, that's what I think I'm supposed to say." And so you say it. But I'm here to change that.
It's such an important thing to be doing as well. I think every HR manager in the world could do with better training at this, and every manager, to be honest, because you're right. Nobody's taught how to deal with it. They're really not. And actually, you talk about the separation of work and personal. I mean, for a lot of people, work used to be the thing that you buried yourself in to avoid dealing with grief, dealing with problems exactly like this, right?
Exactly. So, yep, exactly.
But actually, people are the ones in companies, aren't they? It's you're human at the end of the day, and what's affecting you at home is going to affect you at work. So
yes.
you can't separate the two, however much you try. And I've certainly been one to try.
Yeah, well, I've too. A for effort. We get points for making the effort, but there's a section. One of the points of my North Star strategy is to feel the feelings. And what we forget about is, if we don't feel the feelings, they don't go away. They leak out of us. And I always give that great example of, you've had a bad day at work and you come home and you're ready to kick the dog, you're yelling at the kids, you're short with your spouse, like you go out with your friends and you're kind of cranky. That's that bad day leaking out of you. And until you can acknowledge what has happened, whether it be through writing or talking to somebody, and get it out of your head, because it's, I make a joke that I treat my brain like a not great neighborhood. I try never to go in there alone. So, when we're in our heads and all this bad day stuff is spinning around in our head, it doesn't get better. It just becomes more of a tornado. And so if you can, take out the clutter, take out the wind from the tornado by writing out why you had a bad day, what you're mad about, it decreases the stuff that you're holding inside, and it doesn't leak out of you. And they recently just did a study where they showed parents who come home from having a bad day, it affects their kids. Even though their children, 2-year-old kids, they can feel that bad day. Now, adults feel it too. So if you're at work and you're terrified of talking to this employee who's dealing with cancer, they feel that. Right? And they feel that fear, and all it does is it just adds to either their disrespect of you as a manager, adds to their own fear, adds to their resentment that they have, adds to their anger at the organization. So it's really important that you look, someone you care about is dealing with this thing. It's terrible and it's horrible. And I don't think you should cry to them, but shut your door and have a good cry if you can for a second. And I know, Brits aren't, Americans, we're big on the emoting and talking about our feelings, and that doesn't play as well in Britain. But even in, your employee might be dying, and that's a horrible thing. So shed a tear or two, or, write about it, and then you can get on with helping them.
Much, much smaller scale. I mean, thinking about the bad day kind of point you're making. I mean, me and the other half, we used to kind of excise the bad day on the journey home. And then by the time you get home, right, dealt with that now. I've verbalized my frustration at the bad day, and it's over. It's dealt with, problem solved, in inverted commas.
Exactly.
But it's getting it out, isn't it? Not bottling it up, as you're saying. That's the thing. And it's
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I mean, are there things that we shouldn't say? What isn't helpful?
That's actually the first one on my North Star strategy, and that is speak. So I think the first thing is say something. I think a lot of people get in their own heads and are so afraid of saying the wrong thing, of saying something that might embarrass them, of saying something that might make the person feel worse, that they don't say anything at all. So that's the first thing, is make sure you say something. Now, there's so many things not to say, but what I like to do is go over the number one thing not to say. And that is, if you need anything, let me know. And it feels in the moment like it's really helpful. Like you're like, yes, I so mean this. I care about you. If you need me to go to Alaska to pick up some fancy caviar, I will do it. But we don't really mean anything. And so there's 4 reasons that this phrase is not good. And this sort of goes with many other phrases as well. One is, the first thing you need to do is connect in with the person's experience. And so, David, you did that. You said, I'm really sorry for your loss. You didn't brush over it. You didn't kind of say, you took a moment. Now, I sort of brushed over it because it's been 13 years. And I know we've got a podcast to do and I kind of want to get talking, right?
Fair
But
enough,
don't, acknowledging somebody's hiccup in their life, because that's what it is really important. When you think about our days and how we like to recount them with our partners or our friends, or, when something good happens. And I love this scenario. Like, imagine just for a second, David, that something incredible has happened in your life, like really good, right? Maybe you won, I don't know what you have in England, but you have some type of lottery, right? So maybe you won this lot. Okay, perfect. So maybe you won the lottery. Maybe you just found out that your partner's pregnant. Maybe you just bought a new house. Super excited. Something really, really big has happened. And you go to lunch with people. You know that everyone there knows about this big thing. And you can't wait to talk about it. And not a single person says anything to you. How does that feel?
I think that might have actually happened to me once. But anyway, yeah, not great. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Not great. We feel like, wait a minute, none of you are acknowledging what's just happened to me. And the same thing happens when you're dealing with someone who's dealing with like divorce or whatever it is, right? Cancer or loss or depression. They have this big thing that's happening in their lives and people are pretending it didn't happen. The reality is we need to be acknowledged. I think it's hardwired in our brain somehow. I haven't found the science yet to back it, but I will. And so we all need to be acknowledged. It's really important to us that someone says, I see you. I see your day. I'm so happy for you, or I'm so sad for you. And so make sure that you acknowledge. So that's the first thing. That statement doesn't acknowledge what they're going through. The second reason is, David, what's anything? Like, anything's too big. I had a toddler at the time when my husband was first diagnosed. Did anything mean that you were going to take your no child car, because you don't have any kids, and drive up to the preschool, brand new cleaned car, drive up to the preschool and pick up my vomiting toddler? Is that what you meant by anything? Or did you mean you'd be happy to drop off a bottle of wine? Right? If your friend's mother is dying, did you mean that you were going to be comfortable enough to sit and read to a dying woman? Or did you mean that you'd be happy to tell her a joke every now and then or take her to lunch, right? Anything is too big. The third reason it's not helpful is you are now asking this person who's already stressed out to come up, to take apart their day, like just to pull apart their day and find one thing that you might be willing to do. And, most of our days we do on road. We get up, we use the bathroom, we brush our teeth, whatever it is we do in a certain order, we do it the same way every time. And so we go into the fridge and, here in the US, we eat a lot of cereal, or I think we eat a lot of cereal. I haven't seen the stats lately, but apparently we eat a lot of cereal for breakfast. And so you go into the refrigerator and you realize you're out of milk. But you were out of milk yesterday when you used the last of the cereal, but you didn't put it on the list. You've forgotten about it because it's just, sometimes you put the container back in the fridge because it's just the habit, right? So how can you expect someone who's under a lot of stress to break apart their day? And the fourth thing is, look, y'all, none of us are good about asking for help. We're not good about asking for help on a good day. We're really good at offering, but asking for help requires an incredible amount of vulnerability and admittance that you need support. And on a good day, that's hard for us. When someone is dealing with a crisis, it's quadruply hard because they know that they are putting you out. And nobody wants to be the person who puts somebody out. So those are the 4 reasons that that phrase is not good. Here's what I often tell people to say instead. First, acknowledge it. And you can acknowledge it in a couple of ways. 2 phrases I love. I'm so sorry. And I would even get more personal. I'm so sorry your husband died. We like to use for your loss because it feels gentler. But y'all, my husband died. Yes, it's a loss, but you can say, I'm so sorry your husband died. Like that makes it a little bit more personal. If you know the person's name, I'm so sorry that Anita died. I'm so sorry that Bob died. I'm so sorry, their name is even more personal. So go ahead and acknowledge it. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything. Like it's not action oriented, but it's really helpful because again, you're looking at them and you're honoring them in their space where they are. So that's really important. The second phrase I love, which I still always love, is I don't know what to say. Like what a perfect thing to say because what it says is what you're going through right now is so shocking to me and so horrific. I don't know what to say. I get that there's nothing I can say. And then the third thing I often say to people is if you are going to offer help, which is great, be specific. Be as specific as you possibly can and offer more than once. And the specificness is twofold. One, it's because you know that you're willing to do it, right? So you've kind of figured out, okay, this is what I can do and this is what I'm willing to do. And signals to the person, oh, this is the one thing that she can do and she's willing to do. And when you offer more than once, right? I mean, I'm not talking about offer every hour, but offer once a week, offer every 4 or 5 days. Just say, hey, I'm headed to the grocery store. Let me know if you want me to pick you up 4 or 5 things. That's a really, like, you do it over and over again. That person will expect your call. And then then they'll remember, oh, I'm almost out of milk. So let me put milk on my list. And I know that David, when he calls next week, he's going to offer, and I can say, yeah, can you pick up some milk? I need low fat, skim, whatever it is kind of milk that I need. And so the specificness is so important. And it also, you're giving the person who's in crisis comfort. You're like giving them some boundaries because they need boundaries. Their life is all over the place right now. Here's how I'm willing to help. I'm going to keep calling you every few weeks or every few days, just reminding you. And when you're ready. And then the other thing is it allows them to feel comfortable. They might ask you to do something else that they're afraid to ask someone else to do, but you keep showing up. So they feel more comfortable taking that risk and asking. So, and this applies at work. There's things you can do at work. Maybe it's something like, you put together the person puts together the agenda at the meeting, or maybe they're managing a huge project and you're like, I can take on this one extra piece of this project for you. I'm happy to do it. Right. Or maybe it's closing a sales deal and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to take your commission. I will help you close the sales deal because I know this isn't your favorite part or this isn't your favorite client. It's client services or it's marketing or, there's so many things that we do in our daily lives at work that we can take on something else from somebody else and we can continue to offer over and over again. So I hope that answers your question. You did say the right thing. You absolutely did say the right thing. The acknowledgement is so key. And the more personal you can get with that acknowledgement, the more powerful it is.
Yeah, no, it does answer the question. I think that you don't want to add to the burden, so to speak, do you? By making it so wide and sort of saying anything. And I think that's why your idea about it being specific, it makes so much sense because you're avoiding adding to the pile, aren't you? And you're
Exactly. A lot of people always say you should do. And I remember people saying you should. And I'm like, you just added to my list of things I have to do, which I'm completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There's maybe I should get a second opinion, but I can't even wrap my head around it. What is more helpful is I talked to this doctor about the kind of cancer you have, and he's happy to talk to you. Here's his number. Would you like me to call him for you or call her for you? That's so much more helpful and a little bit bold, right? Because, but if you know the person well enough and you know the kind of cancer they have, like, please don't tell them, you should check out this cancer thing that I heard about on the internet. Not helpful in the least, and extremely dismissive because it shows that you don't even know anything about their cancer. And there are over 200 kinds of cancer, right now that we're aware of. So, and they're all treated differently. And so the idea that one single thing on the internet is going to cure that person's cancer is extremely you just put yourself, if you were in the friend circle, you're now on the edge of the friend circle.
Yeah, well, one single thing on the internet being useful for any purpose is a bit of a stretch, to be honest.
It
but
is,
yes,
it is.
you're completely right. Yes. And I think the other, in the work context as well, the nice thing is you're more likely to be able to understand what you could do that would be helpful. Whereas in a friendship circle, that's less the case, I think. But
I think that's a really good point. I think it really comes down to the golden rule, which I'm sometimes a fan of and sometimes not a fan of, which is, do for others what you would have them do for you. And sometimes that works because, look, I don't like doing laundry, so I might have to offer, actually, I wouldn't offer to do someone's laundry because I don't like it. But I'm a great grocery shopper. Like, I can go grocery shopping. So I could offer to go grocery shopping for somebody as a friend. That sometimes that's very helpful. Sometimes it's not, because if you're really good friends with someone, you might know something about them that they actually don't like doing something that you love doing. And so you might think, oh, I'm not going to offer that because I love doing that. So you assume that they love doing that. And that might not be the case. So sometimes it's paying close attention to who they are and what do they like to do, and when you've talked to them last time. But I think even if you make an offer that's not a good offer for them, the point is you made the offer. And that's really look, there are plenty of offers I didn't take people up on, but I'm still touched by the fact that they sat down and thought, oh, you know what? They might need this. Let me make the offer.
you're right. That is nice, isn't it? And it's, yeah. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier as well, but how can leaders and managers balance that kind of the need the employees have for support with kind of their team or their company's need to keep the work going?
So I just shared with you 1 and 2, which is speak and feel. And the third one is assess. And this is extremely important in the workforce. So when your employee tells you that they have cancer, or you hear about it from somebody, you need to assess the situation. And just like you do before you get a project, you figure out what do we know? What do we need to know to move forward? So moving forward is step 4, which is taking thoughtful action. But you can't do that unless you've assessed the situation. And that means you've sat down with your employee and you've had a conversation of how often will you be able to be in the office, right? Some cancers, they may need to be out for 3 weeks, have surgery, and then recover from surgery, and they're back. Some cancers are chemo. Some cancers are, really intense chemo, so that they're not going to be able to work. Some employees work during their treatment if they can, right? Some employees lose their hair. Some employees don't. It's I'm going to use cancer as an example. So that's a really great thing to start with. It's just sitting down, having that conversation with your employee, and it's so crucial. Look, it's Dan, I know that you just lost your partner and I know you're struggling. I want to be supportive of you and what you need. I'm noticing that when you come into work, you're getting a lot less done. Let's talk about figuring out how to give you some time off so that you can take some, if you want it, so you can take some time. And let's talk about taking some things off of your plate so you can focus on the things that are really important. Because I know you really want to do a good job here. I know you really like working here, right? So it's having that kind of conversation, an honest conversation. When someone is dealing with cancer, it's many times, it's easy to see them dealing with cancer if they're in the workforce, because you will, stereotypically, they might lose their hair, they might lose weight, or they might gain weight. You can sort of see something going different. Grief is hard. Grief and depression are hard because you don't see them as, they don't show oftentimes any physical signs other than they kind of can look, very pale and not healthy. So it's having that conversation. It's also having the conversation is, have you told the team? Now, sometimes a team member will tell you before they tell you, right? So you know that the team knows. But if you haven't told the team, what do you want the team to know? Right? I know the team is going to want to help you and support you. Are you okay with them, putting together vacation time that you can take, or, they'd like to drop off meals or order you Uber Eats or whatever it is, right? So are you okay with that? And that piece of the conversation really requires you talking to HR or talking to your boss about what can the company do or what can we allow our employees to do, right? And it's also so it's understanding that it's, that's like the employee piece. And then it's asking them, it's understanding what projects they have on their plate. I think I saw one manager make the biggest mistake, and he pulled all the big projects off this person's plate. This person was dealing with cancer, and it completely deflated the person dealing with cancer. They didn't feel like they should be at work. They felt ignored. They were left with really simple projects that weren't inspiring to them. I think many managers make the mistake of, let me get the tough stuff off their plate. But sometimes that tough stuff is what they look forward to working on. And if they can still continue to work on it, don't remove it from them. Because what happened was the manager removed it from them in two things. One, the employee totally lost interest, and as soon as they were done with treatment, they actually quit. The second thing is the team learned, do not go to the manager with difficult stuff, because he'll pull the good stuff from you. So it actually ended up really causing a major dip in employee engagement. And also the team took a couple years to come back up, because the employee who left was one of their key employees. It was one of the employees everyone liked. Employees was doing great work. The managers made the mistake. So understanding what the team knows and how the team can support them with work and with personal, and going to the team with that information. So understanding what the company can do. Some organizations are really good at saying, okay, well, here's what we can do. We can allow vacation. So in the US, we have vacation time and you earn it most of the time. So it would be something where, like, if you or something happened to you, I could say, I have all these vacation hours I'm not going to use. Let me give 10 of them to David. So what can the company do to support? So it's understanding what all those pieces are and how they fit together. And then the company can take action. So then the manager can take action. So that's when the manager sits down and they do things like they put together a communication plan. So maybe the employee doesn't want everyone on the team to know that they're dealing with cancer. So what you tell the team is going to be very different, and the team is going to have the rumors and everything else. But you can also say, John has asked that you not ask him, that you not try to get information from him. He's here, he's working, he's going to be working 3 days a week. He's going to be taking Thursdays and Fridays off. And so there's that piece. Then there's a piece of, who's going to do the extra work that now needs to get done. So how do you communicate that with the team? Are they going to get extra pay for it? What's that going to look like? Making plans. If you're going to give someone extra work as a manager, you have to make sure you're giving them extra kudos, because giving them extra work and not giving them, the recognition, right? There's that seeing them, the recognition for their not doing extra work. And it doesn't have to be more money. It can be, a letter of thank you. But whatever it is, acknowledging them is really important, because if you don't acknowledge them, then they have something called compassion fatigue. And so they feel like they're doing something really nice, and then they feel like no one's acknowledging it. And then they start to feel tired, and then they start to feel like, what's the point? And then they start to go into resentment. And so they're just tired and they're resentful and they don't want to do it. So the communication plans, work plans, and continually checking back in, because someone dealing with cancer on the first round of chemo will be very different than the person who shows up on the 5th round of chemo. An employee who's dealing with loss in the first month is going to be very different from an employee who's dealing with loss on the 3rd month. I do want to let all listeners know 3 months is not enough time to get over a loss. So you will still be seeing side effects of that loss in that employee. Because I hear people say, well, it's been 3 months. Why can't they just get back to work? And it's, unless you've dealt with that. So that's the thoughtful action. And then the 5th point of the North Star strategy is to really spend some time reflecting and going back and revisiting. So I mentioned it a little bit in the thoughtful action, which is, okay, we've put all these things in place. Now I need to go back and revisit, right? Now I need to go back and do it again. This is especially key if an employee dies. A lot of times, employees die. They die at work, they die at home, they die in car accidents, and companies are so ill-equipped to handle it. And they think, okay, we'll send everybody the funeral information, and then they give everybody those few hours off, and then they think, okay, everyone's back to work. And grief is a terrifying emotion because it can't be fixed. It can't be you can't kind of bury it. Grief touches into our own, mortality. And so how do you manage grief at work? And I think it is about talking about it, acknowledging it. And it's about, understanding that people are going to be at different places with their grief in different ways. I've had employees who really want to go back to work right away. And I've had employees who I can't even think about going into the office. Checking with your employee and figuring it out. One thing I do want to mention is in the second part of the strategy is we talk about feelings, but we also talk about stereotypes, because we all have stereotypes in our heads from TV, from our friends, from Instagram, from TikTok, of what it means to have cancer, of what it means to have depression, of what it means to have to deal with loss or grief. And we have to understand what those stereotypes are, because those stereotypes affect how we talk to our employees and how we deal with the employee undergoing this issue or friend. And if we think that the employee, if we think, oh, if it was me, I would want to take I wouldn't know if I want to come back to work. I wouldn't be able to function. You don't know until you're actually in that position. And so let's say that's your thinking, and then your employee shows up 5 days after their partner dies or after their child dies and wants to work. You're like, oh no, you can't work. You've got to go. You're already putting on them your idea of what is supposed to happen. And that makes for a really rough relationship with them. So it's really understanding what your stereotype is and understanding you don't know until you know, just kind of giving that away. You just don't know until you know. And even when you do know, how I handled my grief, it's very different from how my friend, who's also a widow, handled her grief. So, at least, you don't know until you know. And I think being humble in that and understanding that and not passing judgment on how someone's behaving is a really important part of being a good manager.
Yes, I see a lot of parallels there just to good leadership, to be honest. I think when you're talking about things like engagement and treating people how they want to be treated, it's the flexibility as well. Everyone's going to be different in the same way that the way you manage everyone in a normal day is going to be different according to each of those individuals.
Yes.
Similar situation, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting.
In a way, it's sort of like Manager 101, but even though it's Manager 101, it's not something that's practiced regularly. And so this is just another opportunity for a manager to take their managing skills and put them in some sort of order and then go in and do the same thing, right? Because you have to talk to your employees and understand where they're coming from. You have to kind of look, I have had employees who work completely opposite the way I work, and they drove me crazy. But I had to get those oh my God, they're driving me crazy. But I got to see, oh, this is my stuff, not their stuff. And I need to deal with these feelings so I can work with them. Right. And so I think what we forget is managing is not about giving people things to do and telling them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Managing is literally inspiring people to do the work that you need to get done that you can't do. Right. I mean, as a manager, if you've got a large team, you can't do there's people on the team who have specialties that you just don't have specialties in. So how do you motivate that person? Well, the first thing you do is you get to know them. Right. And then you deal with the emotions that you have around who they are. Because if you're a good manager, you've got people on the team who are exactly opposite you, who can do the work that you and the other team members can't do. So that you're right. It's managing 101.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously there's a very difficult subject at the center of it, and you do have to be aware of that, as in all the ways that you've said. But I mean, your example about the manager taking all the tough jobs off the person who had cancer. I mean, in my mind, I immediately thought, well, of course, that's what ended up happening. They were disengaged and they left at the first opportunity, because if they hadn't had cancer and you'd done that, that would have been what had happened. So, so what other outcome were you expecting in that situation? Like, if you wouldn't do that to a well person, then don't do it to someone who's ill but still wants to work. The
saying was, what would Jesus do? So WWJD or something like that. I'd be like, what would I do under normal circumstances or something like that? What would a good manager do? That's what you think about, because you're right. That's a really good question to pose to yourself as a manager. Am I doing this? Would I do this to them if they weren't sick? And I think being very honest about that response is important. So it's not like, oh no, I would totally do this. It's like, yeah, no, you probably wouldn't, but really being really honest and looking into it. Cause yeah, it's a tough look. What makes this hard is you have to have a conversation with someone who could die. You have to have a conversation with someone who might commit suicide. You have to have a conversation with someone who just went through something that you hope you never have to go through, but it'll probably happen to you at some point. And so dealing with those emotions is it's scary. It's uncomfortable. And like I said, we can't fix it. And, at least in the US, we're built on the ability, the knowledge that we can do anything. We can make and do anything. And we cannot make, and we cannot do, and we cannot change the fact that our employee or friend is dealing with this issue. We can't fix it. And I think making sure you're comfortable with that and understanding that. And honestly, it's a humbling moment. So if you can't fix it, what can you do? And I think that's really the question that I'd like to see more managers asking.
Yes, it is important. And I mean, culturally in the UK, it's less of a we can do anything, although I'm sure a lot of people do see themselves that way. But for us, it's more keep calm and carry on. So
right.
Particularly when it gets towards the end of the natural outcome there, it's going to be quite difficult keep calm will get more and more difficult, but carrying on could get potentially impossible. So
Right. Yes.
Similar challenge, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. I like that. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So let's talk a bit then about leadership more specifically. What would you say are the biggest leadership lessons that you've learned from life, from your career, from some of your clients, perhaps, so far?
Humility. I got my first managing job when I was 30. I think I was 33 or 34. And I don't know why I thought I knew what I was doing, because I didn't, but somehow I thought I knew what I was doing. And then I started to realize, maybe I don't know exactly what I'm doing. So I'm going to read a lot about managing, and then I'll know what I'm doing. And, the one thing I take away all the time is it doesn't matter how familiar the situation is. I don't know everything. And I think that has been a really key piece of my managing a team, is really taking into heart. I'm catching myself when I think I know everything. Because I don't. I really don't. And I think another key thing is live and let live. And what I mean by that is, I used to think that if you did it this way, it was going to be the right way to do it. It is the right way to do it. And I have watched employees take the long way of doing something that I was like, it's 3 steps, not 27, but how you talk to somebody when they do it differently is so important. And so it's not shutting them down and saying, hey, you should have done it that way. Say, oh my God, it's sort of like the surprise, which it is a surprise, right? I see that you did it this way. Tell me what your thought process was, right? Tell me how you did it that way. And you ask them when things go well, and you ask them when things don't go well, because otherwise that question becomes, oh, I did it wrong. And so that's why she's asking me. So making sure that I ask, understand what their thought process is when they do anything. Because there's always hidden stuff behind there that I can't see. right? There's another boss that told them they had to do it this way, that's the way that they're doing it now. And they think it's the right way to do it because this person has drilled it into their head. And so I don't know that unless I ask those questions and they say, well, I've always done it that way. Really? So tell me, like, yeah, my boss always wanted me to do it this way. So I just did it this way. I think it's a dumb way to do it, but so you think it's a dumb way to do it. So what way would you do it? And then they feel really empowered to do it. So I think those are the two things is, humility. I definitely do not know anything. In fact, I'm very aware that there's so much more that I don't know than so much more than I do know. And then really making sure to understand where they're coming from when they do something.
Two great examples, all first-time managers. I know I made both of those mistakes, particularly the thinking I knew it all. I think
yes.
it's a youth thing, isn't it? When you're younger and you get your first management job, you're like, oh, I'm the boss now, I know what I'm doing. And yeah, most of
David,
us, I think, realize pretty fast
I wish it was a youth thing, but I see managers in their 50s and 60s be like, I know what the right way is.
But that's a different problem. That's a different problem. Once they get to 50s and 60s, it's I've been doing it for so long, I must know what I'm doing.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
But I think your two problems go together quite nicely. Maybe not nicely, that's the wrong word, but they go hand in hand, don't they? Because if you think you know it all, then it doesn't matter if anyone else has a different approach because your way is the right way. Exactly. Again, I must have been a terrible manager to work for in my first one.
I wish I could find some of those people and just apologize to them, be like, I'm really sorry. I really I want to make amends. I'm sorry I was so bad. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't doing it the right way. I'm sorry, that I was, positive that this was, but we'll see. If you're listening, call me. If you work for me, call me.
I'm actually still in touch with both of the people I managed in that first job, and they still talk to me occasionally. So I must have pulled it back at some point.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Although I'm probably going to get a text message after this goes live saying, "What were you on about, David? We hate you." Yeah. Hopefully not. Yeah. Anyway.
Hopefully not. I doubt it.
Yeah. My next question is, what's the best piece of leadership that you've ever seen?
I think it's the leader who was my boss who let me run with a project and protected me from the person above. I think the role of a leader we often forget is also that of a protector sometimes. And so it is, almost in a sense, falling on the sword, right? To protect your team. And that, and you can't tell the team that you've done it. You can't brag that you did it. You just need to do it quietly. And, if it gets back to the team, great. That you took the fall for them. If it doesn't, it's just part of it's sort of like being a parent in a way, right? You can't, there's so many times where my kids will come in and go, Mom, I just did da da da. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been telling you to do that for years and years and years and years and years. But I can't say that because it takes away their thunder. All I can say is, oh my gosh, that's so great. I'm so happy that you did that. How does it feel? Right. And my job is not to shame them or to make them remind them that I did this for them. My job is to give them some information and help protect them as best I can. And so I think that was watching her protect me and understanding that she was protecting me was a very humbling experience because she could have easily thrown me under the bus. So leaders who do that, I'm in awe of. I'm absolutely in awe of.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, that's always been one of the, as you say, it's one of the key responsibilities of any leader. You protect your people, whether that means defending them from the kind of vicious senior manager or whatever, or just the simpler day-to-day stuff like moving an obstacle out of the way.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a very important part of a leader's role, definitely. Now, I don't usually answer my own questions, but one thing, and from what we were talking about before about the kind of grieving process, one really, really good piece of leadership that I experienced in my career was actually a manager who, when we were going through a family bereavement, we lost my grandmother, who was actually really understanding and kind of no questions asked. Just said, David, whatever time you need, you take it. Just let me know we need to be back in the office. And at the time, that was a really stressful period of the business as well. And that manager in particular normally was horrible to work for. So it was just such a stark contrast. And maybe that's why it stuck in my memory.
Yeah.
It was to see such a brilliant piece of leadership from someone who normally I was always butting heads with.
Yeah.
But there we go. It just sort of popped in my brain.
I love that story because I think sometimes what we forget is those leaders have lives. So I'm wondering if your boss had experienced some type of loss and got it on some level. And so, he's not going to reveal it to you. He's not going to share that with you, but he's like, I get it. Go. Right. And he did not have a boss at the time. So I think that's so interesting because you just, we think our managers are like, it reminds me of the way kids think about their teachers. Like they think teachers sleep at the school. They think this is all teachers do. They're always shocked when they see a teacher at a grocery store.
Do they not? No, they sleep at school. I'm sure they sleep at school.
I'm sorry, David. I didn't mean to burst your bubble about that, but they do not sleep at the school. Yeah.
Next, you're going to tell me that Santa's not real.
I'm not going to. Well, why would you say that? As my husband used to say when the kids used to ask that question, he said, you answer the question with a question. So why do you think he's not real? Well, because of this. Well, why do you think that? So you get them thinking in their own head. They go one way or the other. So you answer the question with a question. So, it's the same thing. We forget that this person who we don't particularly like sometimes, right? If our boss we don't like is actually a human being and they, have a family and they go out to dinner and they have, kids or, partners and they experience loss. Right? Maybe maybe their brother died when they were really young, you just don't know. And that reminds me is I always encourage people to share their information with their boss. Because you just don't know. Jerk of a boss you had, you're right, just showed up for you. You're like, what? Wait, are you sure? In a way that was completely surprising to you, because I'm betting if you reached out to him, I'm betting that he dealt with loss previously. And that's why he was so generous.
Yeah, very possibly. In hindsight, I kind of wish that had occurred to me at the time, but never mind.
Right.
It's too late now.
It's too late now.
Yeah. Changing tack a little bit then from what leaders get right, what do you think is the biggest mistake that a leader can make? I mean, just generally, but also in respect of your very specific area of expertise.
Not taking the time to connect with their employees. I just see it over and over and over again. They get into a meeting and they immediately launch into the meeting. And I think that sometimes that is absolutely 100 appropriate and necessary. And sometimes you just need to kick back. The meeting's about to end early. And instead of just being like, so David, what'd you do this weekend? Or, oh my gosh, I got to tell you guys the funniest story what my daughter did, right? Just kind of getting personal is so important because again, if your employees see you as a human being, they will start to relate to you as a human being. I think leaders are afraid of this because they're afraid that, okay, now that I'm human, the employee is going to come to me and go, oh, my cat died, I'm sick and I can't come to work and and yeah, that can happen. But you can also be a firm leader as well. You can say, I'm so sorry about your cat. Why don't you take 2 days off and then come back in the office on Friday, right? And so you can set those boundaries where it's like, no, you can't have all the time off in the world because your cat died, but I'm willing to help you out. And then I expect you to be back in the office. And if that person comes, oh, I can't, I just, you can see a pattern emerging and then you have those conversations that help you move this person either to doing work that they need to do or doing out. But that not personal touch is so, I have worked at organizations where new leaders have come in and they've got, first of all, they get bonuses if they accomplish something in 90 days, which is a huge mistake because usually that bonus is somehow tied to some quantifiable thing. And so they're pushing really hard to get it done. Right. And so they come in with this, okay, I got to get it done. And they skip over getting to know people. I've seen, CEO say come in and say, okay, I'm putting together this team, and instead of taking, and and the reputation has been in the company has been very rocky with the CEOs, and this person comes in and she wants to get to know everyone, but she starts having lunch with taking directors and other people out to lunch, and she's never taken her senior leadership team out to lunch. She's never once suggested that she meet one-on-one with them and just go to lunch. So the senior leadership team is like, kind of like, what are we, chopped liver? And so it's, and she didn't set up a good environment. So I think just taking that time to getting to know people, yes, in the moment, it feels like a waste of time, especially if you're one of those people who likes to drive and do work and doesn't like that kind of small talk stuff. It can feel like a waste of time, but there's so many things we can do in the short term that have so much long-term benefit, that benefit us in the long term, and so many quick things we do in the short term that are bad, that seem really easy, that have really detrimental long-term effects. And I think taking that time to get to know your employee is one of those things. If you do it in the beginning and you take that time, it can be really painful in the beginning, but wow, is it going to pay off long-term?
100% agree with you. Yeah, it's the trust and respect element, isn't it? And I think there's different sort of parts of that scale, aren't there? I think, every human being gets a base level of respect, you'd like to think, but there's also getting respected for your job, and then there's being respected and trusted for actually taking the time to get to know your people, understand what's motivating them, what problems they're facing, what you can do to help, if anything. And all of those added layers just make it so much better in the long term.
Exactly.
It's a really important aspect to focus on. What is the one thing you wish you had known before you started your business?
I think it's just having the courage to do it. It's taken me a long time to get here, and I've had this idea for a very long time. And just right now, there's not, I don't think it matters whether there's people doing it or what you're doing, but this thing is so specific, right? and it feels like there's so many times I work on it and I think, oh, no one's really going to want this. This isn't really, so I think, and so it was sort of a deathbed question for me. I was like, you can let this go, but when you're 90 or 100 and you're dying, are you going to regret not doing this? And I'm like, yep, 100%. So I, kept moving forward and doing it. But I think having the courage to believe that I have something really clear and very useful to offer, would have been really helpful in the beginning. And then I'm sure there are going to be a lot of entrepreneurs who get this, but just getting my financial life in order. Like, you know what? Luckily I did not put anything on credit cards, and I will never do that. But just kind of being really honest, how much is going out the door every month, Kim? How much is coming in? You need to make this equal this to kind of make it work. So just being really clear and honest about that would have been very helpful to me. Now I got it dialed in and I check my numbers every month and I know what I'm doing. And but for a while I was just kind of doing I'm going to pretend I don't see the finances, So
Yes,
I think those two things.
Yeah, that is a familiar story. Yes. I mean, particularly like just having the confidence to back yourself. I think that is. I don't think I've ever spoken to an entrepreneur who's not kind of had that at the beginning, and maybe it's taken them many more years than it would have if they had that confidence at the beginning. Because actually, their expertise hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is one day they've woken up and for whatever reason realised, right, today is the day I'm going to actually do it.
Yes. And that confidence is actually, you need it consistently. Like it doesn't last you for days and days and days. It doesn't last you to the launch of this company. What it does is there are days I'm on it, an hour I'm on it. And when I'm struggling, I'm struggling thinking, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And it's kind of like, oh, right, this is all part of it. 1 minute up, feeling good. Next minute down, got to bring yourself back up. Got to bring, down, bring yourself back up. So that's part of the journey. And being okay with that. I think that's what I've really learned is I'm okay with that now. Like when I'm having a down moment, I'm like, okay, you're feeling a little down, go do something else, come back to it.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the big things I've learned actually doing it myself is learning not to kind of kick myself if I have a slow day.
Yes. Yes.
it happens. You can't be
Yes.
operating at 150% all the time or ever,
Right.
because that's not how percent works. But you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes, you cannot. Yeah. Well, remember you said, when you asked the question is, would I take all this from a person who is fully functioning and, healthy? It's sort of the same thing. When I was working, did I work at 100% all the time when I was at work? No. When I was working for somebody else? No. So why do I expect myself to be full on 100% while I'm doing my own business? I can't.
Exactly. And I've found actually, since I've sort of learned that lesson, when I am at 100%, it lasts longer now.
Yes, for sure. Yep.
Leadership Heroes.
Last question, and this one I call it Leadership Heroes. So the question is, if you had to pick one person, and they can be alive or dead, past or present, real or fictional, if you want. I've not had many fictional ones. Who would, in your opinion, perfectly embody leadership? Who would that be and why?
I'm going to pick two. Because one is Brene Brown. Yeah, she talks about all this stuff, vulnerability, yada, 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 yada. But listening to her talk about how she works with her team is really amazing. They just took like 4 weeks off in the summer. They shut down the office and they took time off. And did it hurt her social media standing? I'm sure it did. Algorithm wise, it probably did. But she didn't care. She says everyone got paid. So that type of brave leadership where I think a lot of leaders don't walk their talk, and she's walking her talk. So I love that. And my grandfather, African-American man, light-skinned, which does play into the story a little bit, went to Cornell and graduated in 1928. So very few Black men in that school at that time. My grandfather was a civil engineer, managed to worked with LaGuardia, was the mayor of New York City, and helped build the Triborough Bridge. Worked with a team of engineers there's a piece of the Triborough Bridge that my grandfather worked on, which is a big bridge in New York City. My grandfather started a bank which did micro lending before it was a thing. And he did micro loans to people who other banks wouldn't loan money to. So we're talking Hispanics and sometimes Jews, Blacks. And so he, showed a great amount of kind of leadership to do that, put that bank together. And eventually that bank was bought. When he went to build a house, my great grandfather bought the land for the house, and my great grandfather passed for white. And then my great grandfather deeded the house to my grandfather, and when they deeded the land to my grandfather, and when the neighbors found out that a Black man bought this land, they made sure that no lumber yards in Queens would sell him lumber. So he had to go to Brooklyn to get his lumber, which, a massive increase in expense because now you have to bring in lumber from someplace else. And he built that house, and it's still there today. And it's only he built it, they lived in it, they sold it, and the people who bought it are still in it. So it's only had 2 owners. And so my grandfather, I often say I drink from a well that I didn't dig. And it's very true when I think about my grandfather. He showed, not just incredible fortitude, but he showed incredible leadership in doing the things that he did. And I'm just really bummed that it took me, it wasn't until really after he died. I knew all the stories, but I wasn't curious about the story until after he died. But yeah, he was an incredible, incredible leader. And he showed me how to lead through diversity, through adversity. And just kind of screw it. Doesn't matter what they think. Doesn't matter how they treat you. You just got to keep your eyes on the prize and you get it done. And that's the other leader. So that's why I have 2.
Wow. I think you only needed the second one, really. But
Really?
I always love when we get picks that have that personal connection, though, because it's so much more powerful and meaningful. And the social leadership aspect of what he was doing there as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep. And yeah. I mean, you know, I literally, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I did nothing in my life to deserve to be his grandchild. And I am so grateful I am his grandchild.
Yeah. What a lovely story. And thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for asking. It's a really good question. I hadn't thought about it for a while, but yeah, thank you.
If you've got time, I always let the guests kind of, if there's something you want to plug, if it's your website, if you'd like to point the listeners towards, if they want to work with you or anything like that, then.
Sure. So I say, if you want to know, I know I mentioned one thing never to say. There's actually 4 other things never ever to say to anybody dealing with any crisis. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to 100actsoflove.com, and that's the number 100. So it's 100actsoflove.com/what not to say. So it's very simple, what not to say, no capitals, no spaces, and you can you'll be able to download that for free. The other thing that I just started doing is I'm doing webinars monthly that review something I call the North Star strategy. If you are a manager or an HR team and you kind of want to get a taste of what it would be like, some tips on how to deal with employees dealing with cancer, loss, or depression, then you could also sign up at the website, and you'll get notifications of the monthly webinars that I do to show you, to give you some really great ideas on how to manage and how to work with employees and teams dealing with a crisis. So those are the 2 things. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do LinkedIn Lives every Thursday at 12 Pacific time. So UK time, that's about 8 p.m. So if you're hanging out and want to, you kind of wrapping up your evening and want to join me, please do. I do them on LinkedIn every Thursday at 12 p.m. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and also on Instagram at 100 Acts of Love. So thank you, David. I appreciate you allowing me to give that little plug.
Of course. I think the service you're offering is really important, and there's not enough things like that in the world at the moment. So I think a lot of managers can benefit from that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'll put all the links and everything in the episode description as well, so people can find it easily. Yeah, and that was it. Thank you again so much for taking the time, Kim. It's been great talking to you, and you've shared some lovely stories as well. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you, David. Thank you for what you're doing. You have another follower because I really enjoyed your podcast. So really grateful to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So thank you for listening, everyone. Hope you will listen again next week. And in the meantime, remember, stay safe, look after yourselves, and be a leader, not a boss.